The way we've sort of set this up is now we have money down here on the bottom left, which is all taxable now, but we got a tax benefit when we put it in. We go shift over to the bottom right. We didn't get a tax benefit when we put it in, but we're paying, interest, dividends, capital gains along the way, but we have a lot of liquidity. And then we've got the top part of the triangle, which is where we still have retirement accounts for the most part, or municipal bond accounts. But when we take that money, it's tax-free.
Well, it's time for another edition of the Financial Puzzle Playbook Podcast with your host, Jim Sumpter. I'm RJ Malik, producer of this podcast. And Jim, as always, great to see you.
RJ, it's great to see you.
I guess it's going to be you and I on this podcast.
It is. It's going to, we're going to kind of go back to the beginning when it was just you and I having conversations. We're going to do that today.
Okay. So what are we talking about on this edition?
Yeah. So, when we talk about the playbook, we've talked about cash flow and insurance, investments, tax, estate. I'm going to get into something today. I've done a little bit on income tax and tax strategies in the past. Today, I'm going to talk about really tax planning. And the reason I want to do this, we've all either we have an extension or we've just recently filed our tax returns. And so we've done the preparation part, which is really, what happened back in 2025. Now we're in, the first half of the year, we start thinking about, okay, what can we do for the remainder of this year? And then also set ourselves up for the next couple of years or the next several years from a tax standpoint. That's where the tax planning comes in. And so, one of the ways that I explain this to clients, I said, when we're talking about the tax preparation, which we do, we do a good bit of that. That's the reactive part. So we're reacting to what did happen. Then we're being proactive in talking about the planning side, which is what I'm going to touch on today. And I'm going to use, a shape of a triangle, and I'm going to kind of walk through sort of how we kind of do that. So today's going to be all about tax planning, which is really from now going forward. And that's what we're going to touch on. So this will be an exciting conversation for you, right?
But it's an important conversation,
It
I
is.
mean, you joke about it and I understand that. And I'm sure, when you talk to other people, it's the same kind of reaction when you say this is an exciting topic, but it is important.
It is. And RJ, what I want you to do, and we will put I have a visual for the tax, well, I call this the tax control triangle. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about how do you control where you take assets from when you need a distribution. And if you only have assets that are in one or two places, you have limited your options.
Okay.
And so what I'm going to talk about today is really the three corners of a triangle. So let's think about that concept. Okay. And where we will start will be the bottom side of the triangle on, we'll call it side A. Okay. And this is going to be things like that we all have. This is your savings account, your high yield savings account, dividends from investments, interest. This is where if we have rental income from rental properties, if we have oil or gas leases and we're getting royalties, things like that, everything is going to land in this bottom side of the triangle, and that we're calling, part A. And here's what that means is we've taken dollars that we've already paid tax on, and we've invested those dollars, or we've put those into a savings account. So think about it like this. You get your paycheck and you put, $300 into your savings account. You've already paid tax on that $300. Now that $300 is in your high yield savings account earning, 3.5%, 4%. The interest that you receive off of that each year, that is taxable in that year. We take the same money and we put it into, XYZ stock. We'll call it Apple stock. Okay. So, and then Apple pays a dividend and we receive that dividend. We're going to pay income tax on that dividend. But that original $300 we put in after tax, we pay our taxes along the way on the income. Okay. That's side A. Let's shift over to the bottom part of the triangle and let's talk about side B of the triangle. And this is going to be things like our 401k, our 403b, our IRAs. This is where that same $300, we've now, instead of putting that into our checking account, we've put that into our 401k. We've put that into a traditional IRA contribution. Okay. So we've gotten a tax benefit today for that money. It's going to grow tax deferred, okay? But then when we take it out in retirement or before, what happens? Whatever that distribution we take is taxable.
Right.
As ordinary income, 100%, okay? So what we've got right now is we've got two sides of a triangle and we're on the bottom portion of the triangle. We've got money that we're paying tax on along the way, and then we've got money that we're paying tax on when we distribute it out. So really and truly, everything that we have on this bottom portion has a tax implication today when we take the money out. So let's think about it. Let's just stop there because this is where a lot of people have a tremendous amount of their assets, okay, is in this taxable, what I call taxable buckets.
Right.
And everything that they have as income is taxable. And so when we're talking about, someone says, Jim, I need $3,000 a month. Where do I take it from? Well, let's take it from your 401k, or let's take it from your IRA, or we'll just get it from your dividends or your interest that's coming in. And so, but every dollar that you're taking of that 3,000 is taxable. So if you add that plus, maybe your Social Security, or maybe there's some, other rental income that's coming in, or maybe you've got a pension that's coming in, all of that is taxable. So now everything you have, again, taxable income. So you really don't have any control on that. Okay. So that's what a lot of people have. And that's where a lot of people, it sort of stops. So let's move up the triangle. Now let's talk about this top part just a little bit. And this is where I think me as a financial planner can really help a client. And quite honestly, RJ, the sooner that we can get to this top bucket of the triangle, the better, because the more opportunity we're going to have for compounding and for interest along the way. This is where Roth IRA comes in. It's where municipal bonds come in. There are some insurance strategies. If we use some cash value from insurances, that's where this is going to come in. And so let's talk about maybe a Roth IRA. And so, if I'm in my 20s or my 30s and I'm putting money into a Roth IRA bucket, even if it's a Roth 401k, it's still in this top portion of the triangle. That money goes in after tax. So let's use our same $300. Okay. So we have that $300 that goes into the Roth IRA or into the Roth 401k. We've paid tax on that 300.
Okay.
But what happens after that? It's going to grow tax free. And then when we decide to take it out, it's tax free. So now what we've got is we have tax-free income when we need that income. The same thing would be if we have municipal bond interest, or if we're taking distributions from, say, a cash value on a life insurance policy, things like that. I'm going to touch on Roth conversions in a minute, but the way we've sort of set this up is now we have money down here on the bottom left, which is all taxable now, but we got a tax benefit when we put it in. We go shift over to the bottom right. We didn't get a tax benefit when we put it in, but we're paying, interest, dividends, capital gains along the way, but we have a lot of liquidity benefit. And then we've got the top part of the triangle, which is where we still have retirement accounts for the most part, or municipal bond accounts. But when we take that money, it's tax free. Okay. So you might think, well, why don't we just put it all into the tax free part? Well, that would be amazing to have it there. But let's think about, how did it get there? We didn't get a tax benefit today when we put it in, or back, whenever we put it in. It's the tax benefit along the way with the growth, and then it comes out tax free. So we want to be able to have some benefit today and some benefit in the future. So if we have money in all three parts of this triangle, what that does when we do need money, generally in retirement, is we have a lot of flexibility. Okay. So let's think about this, and I'm just going to do some easy math. Okay. Let's say that I'm married filing jointly, and Social Security between myself and my spouse, let's call it $40,000. Okay. At that point, the tax on there's going to be tax on the Social Security. Okay. Then let's say I need $3,000 a month. So that's 3 times 12, that's 36,000. So now I'm taking 36,000 from the accounts. We add it to the 40. So now I'm at 76,000. Let's say there's another 24,000 of interest, dividends, capital gains, royalties, something other. So now I'm sitting at $100,000. Okay. If I'm taking that $100,000 and all of it is only on those bottom two, every dime of that is taxable. And I'm going to be in, at that level, probably somewhere around a 15-16% effective tax rate. Plus, in my state, we have a state income tax. So, it's another 5. So let's call it 20%. So on that 100,000, I'm paying $20,000 in tax. Okay. Because I didn't have a whole lot of control. I took it from the buckets that I had. What if we had money in that top bucket? And what if that same 3,000 that I needed, I was able to take a portion from the bottom two and then a portion from the top? Well, first of all, if it's coming to me tax free, maybe I don't need 3,000 a month. Maybe I only need 2,500 a month, because I'm not needing as much, because I'm not paying as much in income taxes. What if I took a couple of thousand from the bottom and 1,500 from the top? What does that do? Well, that's going to reduce that 100,000 down by probably, 17, 18,000. So now I'm only paying tax on, say, 82 or 83,000. And what I've done is I've reduced my tax bill by probably $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 because of the control that I have along the way. This is a very simple illustration. And again, we'll put the illustration in the show notes so someone can look at it. But what it's doing is it's saying, okay, we have money in all three buckets. So when do you start doing this? I would argue as early as possible, because we want to get some benefit today. We want to have the ability to have it in the future. But what if you haven't done that? What if you're, my age, mid-50s, and you have nothing in that top bucket? What do? This is where a lot of times we'll use a tax strategy of a Roth IRA conversion. And really what that is taking money from the bottom and shifting it to the top, paying some tax today, but then letting it grow tax-free, and then where you can distribute it tax-free along the way. there's a lot of other factors that have to factor into this because, if depending on your age, we don't want to hurt Medicare pricing with IRMA. We don't want to create a larger tax bill today to where you jump up to a higher tax bracket. So there's a tremendous amount of strategy as to far as how much and when and how often we do this. And that's where working with a planner, a certified financial planner, we've got the tools and resources to help calculate a lot of this. That's part of a strategy when we talk about this.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you then put everything in a Roth IRA to begin with?
So
Pay first,
yeah,
and then you won't pay
because
later.
you're not going to get the tax benefit today when you put the money in there. Because remember that $300, you're paying income taxes today on that 300. Now, quite honestly, and this isn't an always thing, but it's a many times thing. If you're in your 20s, you're probably in a lower tax bracket than you will be in the future, even in your 30s. If you're single, if you're in your 20s, my feeling is load this thing up because you're going to get as many doubles on that money. We talked about the rule of 72 way back, probably about 40 episodes ago
Yeah, right.
when I touched on investment planning. But the rule of 72 says if you take the number 72, divide it by an average interest rate, that is how many years does it take money to double. And so if you're in your 20s and you're not going to use this money until at least 60, 65, maybe a little longer when you retire, it's very likely that you're going to get 3, 4, maybe even 5 doubles depending on what your investment strategy was. Well, if you're loading this thing up on the top rung, and every dollar you're putting in there is growing tax free, and then when you take it out it's tax free, that's going to give you a huge opportunity and a huge advantage. But when you put it in, you didn't get any tax advantage. So the other thing that happens is we've touched on this whole concept of the great wealth transfer, and we'll do many more podcasts getting really a lot deeper on that. But if you inherit money, if you inherit an IRA, if you inherit a Roth IRA, if you receive, life insurance benefits, if you receive trust proceeds, I had a client last year that they actually inherited some oil wells. So they inherited royalty income. When you inherit money, that money could be in these different places, and that could totally affect your strategy because now you have this new piece of money that, kind of fits one of these buckets. So there's not a cookie cutter, this is the way you always do it. What I can tell you is every investment is going to fit into one of those corners of the triangle. And the more control that you have over it when you take distributions, the better that you can manage your tax strategy along the way. And so when I start talking about tax planning, and I'll do tax planning really between right now and tax season next year, it's like an ongoing process. It's a part of financial planning, but we actually have like tax strategy and tax planning meetings where this is literally what we're talking about is how do we position everything for the next 6, 9, 12 months, up to 12, 15, 20 years. What do you do now to put yourself in a position for the future? Um, and, I haven't really talked a lot of planning strategies on the podcast, but I'm going to be doing a good bit more of this. I think this is just, one simple concept that I like. This is how do you plan today for the future,
And planning is really up to the individual. It's not cookie cutter. It really is dependent on a person's personal situation and what their goals are.
Hi everyone, I'm Cassidy, the second C in CMC Financial. So Dad sometimes gets on a roll with this podcast and might forget to remind you about a few things. 1, don't forget to like and share this podcast and leave a review. 2, follow CMC Financial on all of the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And 3, go check out the website at cmcfp.com. Okay, back to my dad. He's probably still talking.
We have things happen in life. I talk about the puzzle, the financial puzzle all the time. And, I think we even start off with the introduction of this whole podcast. Things will happen in your life that affect your financial puzzle that are totally beyond your control.
Right.
And I know you have that in your personal life. I've had that in my life. Things have happened totally beyond our control that completely changed and adjusted our strategy. Well, think about it like this. What if there's a tax law change? What if you do inherit some money? What if you change jobs? What if, your company was offering a Roth 401k bucket and you change jobs and the new company doesn't offer that? What if they don't offer any type of retirement and you have to do it on your own? You have to, what if you start your own business? Are you doing a SEP, a simple plan, a solo 401k? All of these different things, it doesn't matter what the investment is. Whether it's a real estate portfolio or a stock portfolio, or a crypto portfolio, it all is going to affect and fit into one of these corners. And that's why I think it's a fairly simple concept. How we approach it may be a little more complex.
Sure.
But the concept is pretty simple. You want money in all three sides, in all three corners of the triangle, so that you have choices when you do get ready to take distributions. So,
as always, the variety is the spice of life, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I like the way you say that. I like the way you say that. If you've only got one corner, then you're limited.
Right.
And we can certainly plan around that one corner. But if you have money in all three corners, it's a whole lot. You have a lot more flexibility. So
it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah. So what questions do you have? But that's really what I wanted to cover today.
Well, I guess then for people, well, maybe for parents talking with their kids who are getting into the workplace, they may want to focus on the top of your triangle, the IRA there, because that seems to, that in my mind, and you tell me if I'm wrong, that seems more beneficial for a younger person than for a person who starts late.
Right. And the reason is this, because and I'm making very generalizations here, but generally when you're younger, you're working, you're starting out, you're going to be making less money then than you will later on. And you're probably in a lower tax bracket then than you will be later on. So the benefit of tax deferral today is not as great as it will be in the future. And so where that benefits someone in that age group is they can put dollars into that Roth 401k bucket. They can, if you have, a life insurance strategy or something like that, you can begin to build cash value. Well, going back to my $300 analogy, that $300 that you're putting into that plan, that's after tax. You've paid tax on that money today, but the growth forward and the distribution at a point in time are tax free. And that's where the advantage is.
Is the growth in the different categories, the different parts of the triangle, do they vary or are they pretty similar?
That's a great question. And I will say in general, the growth is going to be the same, because here's the thing. I mentioned Apple stock a few minutes ago, and I'll just pick on Apple, pick whatever investment. You could buy the S&P 500 ETF if you wanted. You can have that in a Roth IRA. You can have that in a traditional IRA. You can have that in an inherited IRA, or we could shift over to this side and you could have that in just a regular brokerage account. You can have exactly the same investment in all three places. And the growth is the growth.
Okay.
The growth is not going to change. Now, what could change a little bit is if you reinvested a dividend, so you bought more shares, that could be a little bit different in the bottom. I think we decided bottom right of the triangle, because of that money being taxed today as instead of being tax deferred, but the dividend is the same.
Okay.
So, but it doesn't matter where you own that money. It's, investment wise, it's the same. Yes, 100%, 100%. And, I always argue you need money in all three because,
that makes sense to me.
Yeah, because if you think about, if you're in your 20s, and let's think about liquidity just a second. Let's say you have a goal of, educating a child in, 15 years. Well, you don't want all of your money over here in your 401k, because then the only way to get that money out is to be over 59 and a half. And you may be 59 and a half when your child goes to school, but that's the only way to get it out without a penalty.
Right.
If you're in the upper bucket, we really are trying to get more doubles on that and create options down the road. Now, there are some strategies with education with using Roth IRAs. That's another conversation, another podcast. But for the most part, in general, that's retirement money, and you want to treat it like retirement money. But on this bottom, the bottom side over here, that money has tremendous liquidity because it's not tied up, if you will, in retirement money. That's money that you could go get. So you can have a shorter goal down here, but still have that, that income, that distribution, things like that. But you can go get it easier. So they all have advantages and they all have disadvantages.
Right.
That's the reason I say I think flexibility is the key. Having money in all three buckets or all three, points of the triangle, I think is the best way to go and approach it.
And the important thing is to know what the advantages and disadvantages are, and
That's
then
right.
you can then, put it together with what's going on in your life.
Oh, 100%.
And you can make adjustments there.
Yeah, and what changes and what comes up and, makes a difference. And, the other thing is what changes in tax law.
Yes.
We talk about it all the time. We can't, I can't use the G word. I can't guarantee anything.
Right.
But one thing I can pretty much assure you is tax code is going to change. I tell my students in my class that I teach all the time, I said, okay, who writes tax code? Congress. Who makes changes all the time? Congress. And, it's pretty much assured that at some point in time, there will be tax code that changes, and it very much could affect you depending on what your situation is. So we're always looking at that. It's the other thing that I talk about all the time when I say, a financial plan is not something we do one time. We have a nice book, we print it out, we look at it, and then we put it on a shelf and forget about it. Financial planning is an ongoing process that we're always looking at goals, objectives, what you're trying to accomplish, what is the tax code, what does your situation look like, what is your income need, what is your cash flow, what is your budget. I mean, all of those things are fluid, and a financial plan is fluid, and tax planning is fluid. And that is why, this time of the year through really the rest of the year, we'll be doing planning for a lot of our clients. And that's one thing that I get. If I do more of one thing every single year, I do more tax planning every single year from the previous year than I did, because it's the one thing that more people are like, I really need that. And
Because people are learning,
yeah,
and each
yeah.
generation, I can tell you, my father's planning is a lot different than what my wife and I are planning, because
Hmm.
my dad didn't have, I mean, he was a smart guy and he did some really good things, but at the same time, he didn't have the information or the tools at his disposal. And as you go along, and as all financial planners go along, you're seeing different situations, and you're learning from that, and you're adjusting and you're adapting.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah.
This way, plans are changing. I mean, let's face it, plans are the way you were planning back in the 90s and early 2000s. It's different than it is today.
It is very different, very, very different. The strategies. Now, what's interesting is I started talking about this tax control triangle concept back in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So the concept has not changed.
Right.
What has changed is what fits into the buckets and where is it appropriate, and how do we get there? When I started my career, I'm going to date myself for a minute. The Roth IRA had not been created yet.
Okay.
um, it came about just after, but yeah, when I actually started, the Roth IRA had not been created.
But that's a great
And I
example.
remember when it first came out, and there was a lot of talk about, wow, this could be a really cool thing. Um, up until about 2 or 3 years ago, if you had a 529 plan, so an education plan for a child, and you didn't use it all, you had options, but they were limited. Now, one of the options is, and there's a lot of ifs here, but if the plan's been in existence for 15 years, it's got the same beneficiary, so on and so forth, you can contribute from that 529. You can convert that to a Roth IRA, so the top rung of the triangle, for the beneficiary that didn't need it in school.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
up until about 2 or 3 years ago, you couldn't do that. So that is a strategy that has now come into play, and it's a way to get more money into that upper rung. Up until about 4 or 5 years ago, most 401k plans, the only option was this bottom left, and everything was deferred because you had a traditional 401k. Now we have a Roth 401k portion of the plan, if the plan allows it. So not every plan does, but a lot of them do. So again, as a certified financial planner, when I'm looking at your benefits that are offered for your company, I am always looking for these, 2 or 3 or 4 things, so that we can advise. But here's what happens. It all comes back to this concept of the triangle.
I was just about to say to you that yes, the base of everything is that triangle, and
Yeah,
it's up to you to help your client figure out which part of the triangle will benefit them at a specific time in their life.
that's correct. That's correct. That's correct. So RJ, that's my story about shapes today. And so we've covered the triangle. Maybe we'll do a circle and square at some point. But today was all about triangles. So
Maybe next time it's an isosceles triangle we can do, or something
oh
like
wow,
that.
okay. So now look, so we're gonna do that, and then you're gonna ask me all about the Pythagorean
There
theorem and
you
all this kind of stuff, and area and yeah. What we can get into geometry later.
Yeah, let's not do that. Let's
This podcast is taking a huge different turn if
Yes,
we're starting to do geometry.
absolutely. How about some contact information?
Yeah, so as RJ, as always, we've got our main website, cmcfp.com. I do want to talk about our tax portion of our website, which is tax.cmcfp.com. We have some, examples of everything from the tax planning we've talked about. My direct number is 205-510-9074. And then you can find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or our YouTube channel.
Excellent. Great information. Enjoyed talking with you about it today. And most importantly, thank you for listening to the Financial Puzzle Playbook podcast. We ask you to share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review, because this actually helps others find the show. Again, thank you for listening. And for Jim and everyone at the Financial Puzzle Playbook, I'm RJ Malik, and we'll see you at the next podcast.
Roth conversions and contributions to Roth IRAs may have tax implications and are subject to IRS rules and eligibility requirements. Converted amounts are generally taxable in the year of conversion and may increase your current year tax liability. Future qualified withdrawals from a Roth IRA may be tax-free if certain conditions are met. Consult your tax and financial professionals regarding your specific situation. Neither Private Client Services, RFG Advisory, nor its advisors acting in their capacity as a registered representative or investment advisory representative provide or offer to provide accounting, tax-related services, or advice.